What is up, everybody? Sean Sheehan back here with another edition of the Sheehan Show on Sherdog.com, and today I am looking ahead to my top 5 fights for the upcoming month of September. And you know what? There's do you know what? There's a lot of kind of next to top level fights coming up this month, right? There's actually, I would argue, maybe no top level fight this month, but there's lots of good stuff. Like some months we have a blow huge main event, John Jones versus Gagne or something like that, this one we're looking forward to for a long time. And I feel like we don't have that in this month. The UFC pay-per-view is somewhat a damn squib, although we will be talking about that in a second, and I'll give you my reasons for, spoiler alert, picking that here. We do have a magnificent rematch, which I will talk about as well, but I do think it is a month I think we will look back on and see that there's a lot of movement maybe towards the top rather than possibly at the top, but we'll get into all of that as we go anyway. So let's start off, and I am going to, funnily enough, start off with that fight I just mentioned. Now, I was going to look at some of the fights, and there's a couple of good fights from the French card. Now, I'm not sure if this video will be out before or after that French card, so that's why I kind of left it to the side. But UFC Paris, as I am calling it, is pretty good, and there's some good stuff on that. But I'm going to look ahead to the September the 9th card first, and Adesanya versus Strickland, and I'm going to talk about Adesanya versus Strickland as my first fight here. Now, anyone who knows me knows I'm maybe not the not the biggest fan of how maybe both of these lads carry themselves. Like, and I outside of the cage, that's another issue, but inside of the cage, maybe. I'm a big admirer of Adesanya's ability and a big believer in Adesanya's ability, but I'm not exactly sure that he uses it to the utmost to bring him to the very top. And I think if he did, he could be like one of the biggest stars we've ever seen in the history of sport. I truly believe that. And I just feel like he's kind of holding himself back a little bit at times. In a few of his fights now, he's had some great fights, he's had some great finishes and all like that, but it feels like just when he's on a roll, he always kind of, come on, pull yourself back there a bit, Israel. That's all. And from him and from everyone else, it's like on the way up, right? Now, this started negatively, but I'll get positive. Just one more bit of negativity first. For Sean Strickland, you look at it and you really think like, and this is not just me, so if this is just my opinion, I could maybe put it to the side for a second, but I feel like I've heard a lot of people say Sean Strickland doesn't have the quality to fight at this level. Middleweight obviously is probably, apart from maybe women's 145, the weakest division in the UFC. If you look at the rankings, it's, there's some good fighters there, no doubt about it. But if you look at the lightweight rankings, the bantamweight rankings, and if any of the other rankings nearly, it really does pale in comparison. And it's almost as if Strickland is a symptom of that in a way. So you put those two things together and you're thinking, well, look, could we have a better title fight here? And no, maybe not. Like, should we have better quality in the middleweight division? Like, should the UFC have gone out and signed a Soldic? Or should they have gone out and signed, tried to get Eblen, or tried to get whoever it might be? And maybe not all those lads are available to get, but you know what I mean? Like, could it be better? Should it be better? Maybe it should, right? Could we expect better? Maybe we could. But what I do think we have is one thing that will lead to the other, right? And what I mean by that is Adesanya needs a guy who he can make himself look good against. Now, I think he's had that in the past, right? And he's not always done it. The biggest case of mine, I think, is the Jared Cannonier fight, and maybe that's a bit of easy fodder there, considering people were videoed leaving at the 4th round and all. But a little bit of a Tory fight as well. Not so much the Whitaker fight. I'm not big. I'm personally not picking out the losses here because that's not what I'm kind of talking about in this. But if you put him in there against Sean Strickland, now this can go two ways because it has gone two ways with Adesanya in the past. If he spends 5 rounds kind of jabbing up Sean Strickland and Strickland just can't land and it turns into one of them, it could be the worst we've ever seen out of Adesanya. Like, it really could have been. But I just don't think he will do that. I've thought this before. I've been caught before with Adesanya, but I feel like, he's over in front of not his home country fans, but he's I suppose he's adopted home country, or he's neighbouring home country fans. Let's say it, and there will be a lot of his home country New Zealand fans travelling over and not everything like that. But his home area fans, let's just put it that way. I think he'll have the crown behind him without a shadow of a doubt. He will surely want to set the record straight in terms of the criticism he got for the Cannonier fight. Like he says before, he's going to do this, that, and that, and he doesn't. And then afterwards, he's like saying, well, whatever. And he hears that criticism, he sees it. Like, surely you look at, you're Adesanya now, right? And he is one of the most intelligent guys around. And he has to look at that middleweight division and think to himself, this middleweight division is there for the taking. I am here to become a superstar, right? And this is the crux of why, this is my top 5, my personal top 5 fights for the month. This is the crux of why it's one of my top 5 fights for the month, right? It is the massive, big, huge opportunity for Israel Adesanya to go to that next level again, right? And I'll tell you why it is that, okay? Because he beat Pereira, and the most no-brainer trilogy fight ever was there. The most no-brainer trilogy fight. They both had knocked each other out. There was the whole background with the kickboxing and all that, and then they don't make it, right? They don't make it. And like, at that stage, anyone with a brain is probably thinking like, what is going on here? Like, I've invested into both of these fights. This has to be in it, and And then, they start talking about weight cutting and everything like that, right? They talk about all that. So fine. As always happens, right? What was that? April, 4, 5, 6 months ago, whatever it was. We've half forgotten about that now. Like, I won't forget about it. I know a lot of people here won't forget about it. But when it's Saturday night and the cage closes, we'll soon forget about it. So Adesanya has he has a possibility to do 2 things, right? In there. Actually, we'll say 3 things. He's the possibility to sink the place out, as I mentioned earlier on, and it's going to be a 5-round, win. I don't see him losing. No, maybe he will lose, right? But I feel like Strickland can be a good guy to make him look well, right? So maybe stinks the place out or loses. So actually, a loss might be better for him than stinging the place out. I actually think it would, because he'd get the rematch, he'd probably win it. So there we go. And the 2 other options are this. In both options, you have to style on him. Like, you have to beat him. You have to beat him well. You have to go in there with the opinion of yourself that you are the best middleweight in the world and he is the next guy in line. Like, I'm not saying like take him lightly. I'm not saying put yourself in any grave danger or anything like that. I'm not saying that. Go out and swing wildly and get into a war. Pick him off, hit him, take advantage of it and destroy him. Like just do what Ian Gary did to Neil Magny last day. I actually think it's a pretty comparable matchup. That I actually think Magny's a harder matchup for Gary than Strickland is for Adesanya. Like, if you think about that, right? If you think about that, from where all 4 guys are in their careers, I think that's a hard thing to actually argue with, to be honest. Do that sort of thing. Kick the leg off him. Beat him. Just beat him down, right? And then the next thing, right? There's 2 options in. You do what you have been doing, and this is Adesanya's greatest strength, and actually this is a part of why I think he's on superstardom, because look at the amount of fights he's had in the last few years. Like 2023, this is going to be second fight. 3 fights 2022, 2 fights 2021. Obviously the pandemic, and he still had 2 fights. 3 fights 2019. 4 fights 2018 when he comes into the UFC. He's had so many fights. It's very rare you see a guy even have, the ability to have 2 fights even at the very top level. It's very hard. And that's a credit to him. That's why I talk about him so highly, as well as his ability. He fights so often, and it's all he does is fighting and everything like that, right? So if he wins this, do that. Fight and fight and fight and fight and destroy this whole middleweight division. Go through lads twice, go through everything, right? And that can make you the next superstar, right? I feel like you look at Israel, he's a star, without a shadow of a doubt. But you look at O'Malley, and that was a superstar-making performance the last day, right? A superstar-making performance. I don't think Adesanya has a dance partner apart from LX3, which may now even have passed, but we'll get back to it in a second, which actually can make him a superstar like that. Unless it's a Chimaev maybe down the line, but that could be the next part of it, right? So what you do is just beat the next guy and the next guy and the next guy and the next guy. That's what he's great at, and he's on the cusp of doing that, right? But also, there are another few options. So the part 2 is that what I just alluded to, the star making. It could be Chimaev or someone else. You never know who comes out at middleweight, who becomes the guy. It could be a rematch with Strickland if Strickland was to win. That, right? Next. Or else the trilogy with Pereira. Let's say Pereira wins light heavyweight, wins the title if he's fighting for one, and he goes up and he fights him and he becomes the double champ and all that. That's on your cusp, right? So here we go. And I'll move on after this, right? But for me, this last 8-9 minutes, whatever I've been talking about here, it all leads to Adesanya taking that next step. And maybe people are sitting here, as I alluded to a second ago, and thinking, Shawnee, what are you talking about? This guy's already a star. He has his Puma deal or whatever it is already. He's earning loads of money. He's headlining all these cards. He's one of the biggest, he's a good draw and everything like that. Yes, right? Yes. But he could be the next Jones, GSP, Cyborg, whoever it might be. Not necessarily McGregor. Okay, no one's going to get to that level. But he could become second. He could get Habib levels, maybe. He could do that sort of thing in terms of draw. I'm not talking about fighting ability or anything like that, but in terms of superstardom, right? I think he's on the cusp of that. I really do think he's on the cusp of that. And this is the next step to get to a couple of bigger steps which are on the way. And you have to do it here. And that's why I'm looking forward to it. If you stumble at this step, and I'll say it again, I think stumbling to a meh 50-45 win is the worst thing you can do here. The worst thing you can do here when you're at that level. You cannot fumble. And I know people use that fumble the bag thing, but you cannot fumble it at this stage. You have to take that opportunity and go to the next level if you're Israel Adesanya. And that to me is why this fight is huge and why I'm looking forward to it. All right, next fight up. And this it is a very different fight, but God almighty, it's just as meaningful. September the 16th, the main event at the T-Mobile Arena. Alexa Grasso and I've put that on the bed. Alexa Grasso against Valentina Shevchenko for the second time. What a massive fight this is. Like, I remember I did I didn't like my top 5 fights for the year ahead, not last year but the year before, right? And I think my number 1 fight that time was Pena versus Nunes. Now, thinking back, people are probably thinking, oh, well, what are you talking about? Okay, Nunes was always going to beat her and everything like that, right? But was she? Like, was she always going to beat her? Now, we could say afterwards, yeah, she was, but I love that bit of intrigue. That's one of my favourite things in mixed martial arts. Actually, I came up with a theory the other day, right? And I actually haven't looked it up or anything, but like, if you think about rematches, you think about trilogies in the UFC, how many times is someone, like the first person beaten, either say won the second one when they rematch or won the second and third? Let's say the example I would thought of, and I couldn't think of another one, but I'm sure there's probably a few of them out there, was Stipe versus Cormier. So obviously Cormier won the first and then Stipe won the next 2. Now look, sometimes it might happen where, let's say Edwards and Usman is a good example of this, isn't it? Because Usman won the first one, yeah, and then Edwards won the next 2. But that's a bit different because there's like 4 or 5 years in between them, whatever. Close ones, all ones together. Like I think it very rarely happens, right? Because, and not saying that's the case for Usman and Edwards, but there was a bit of injuries. But like sometimes people can get older, and like BJ Penn when he fought Frankie Edgar a few times apart, things can change, right? But the point here is the intrigue of that fallen champion or the big favourite or whatever it might be having lost to someone and then having to fight him again. I just think is one of the most fascinating things in sports. Because like, we'll use the Edwards-Usman example here again. I remember I was on John Anik's show and I was speaking to him about it. We'll just use the second and third fight here for an example for a second. And I'm now like, did they fight the first time? They did, didn't they? So between the big knockout, the not from the cloth, he wasn't cut, to the second fight, the chat around that I found very interesting and very illuminating to like future coverage, like what we're doing here. And the chat around in was like, how much of an improvement will Edwards have made from the first fight? And I think the answer to that was a lot, right? And we'll say the first fight in this duo of fights. Look at Grasso here. How much of an improvement will that have made her? You know, I think it was Teddy Atlas was saying, John Anik was quoting Teddy Atlas when he said, what was it, 30% people improve after they become champion? Which no, I'm not too sure. Obviously, it's going to depend, right? But then the other side of it then, what is the reaction of the champion going to be? Whether it was Usman in that situation or Shevchenko here. Is it the case of, oh, well, you know, they're finished. This was the end of their career. They're not the same as they used to be. They've had a lot of fights and everything like that. Is it a blip? You know? You could say, well, maybe Nunes and Pena, was that a blip? You know, and they come back and they just kind of, you know, take their belt back in the second fight. Is it something like that? Does the person have their number? Whether it's Edwards, whether it's Pena, whether it's Grasso, whoever it might be. Does that person have their number? There are many different integers. And the biggest integer I like to think about is like the mental aspect of it. Because I always felt like Valentina Shevchenko was someone who kind of was so mentally tough. She just kind of showed up, had so much preparation done that she didn't even need to think about that. It was just set. And then she could go out and have her unbelievable game plan, put it in practice and win the fight. That's how I think of Valentina Shevchenko. But now you think of Shevchenko and you're thinking, oh, what's the mindset going to be like coming in here? You know, look what happened in the last one. It was, you know, when it's a 4-round face crank as well, it's like, oh, did the cardio go? Were you prepared enough? Is that cardio going to go again? All of this sort of thing, right? All of this sort of thing. And even if that's not necessarily the case, that could be the mindset. And that to me, I find that one of the most fascinating things, because us as lay people here, I suppose, watching these fights from home, I always find it very hard, like, oh, how am I going to predict, you know, what someone could be carrying injury, someone could have improved a lot, someone could have learned how to leg kick in the last guy. We just don't know those things, those intangibles, to the people who are not in the gym. I hate the word intangibles, but we don't know any of those things. But the speculation about those things is you know, it's part of what we do, right? But there's no speculation almost in this sort of case, because we know there's a hump to overcome, and that hump was just losing. That's a mental hump, physical hump, tactical hump, technical hump, all to overcome. And we know that. And that is so fascinating. That's almost what sport is all about. You know, you've been trying and then finally, you know, you do it. Or you've been winning and then finally you lose. That's crazy. Like, that's crazy to be able to prepare for that, to change or not change, or what do you do? I just find all of that so unbelievably intriguing, and I can't wait for this fight. Like, the thing about this as well is we could get loads of answers to this coming up. I could jump on a conference call and ask Shevchenko some of them questions, and we'll get answers. And like, the answers would probably be pretty cookie cutter, let's be honest. But the proof is in the pudding. Or maybe for this case, the proof is in the cookies. And the winning of the fight we'll know. Can't wait for it. Cannot wait for it. Right. Let's get to the next one. And I'm going to, so those two from the UFC, and I'm going to go with 3 different organizations now for the next 3. But there's some really good fights coming up. The first one, September 23rd here in Ireland, is Johnny Eblen versus Fabian Edwards. And you think Fabian Edwards, maybe people don't watch a lot of Bellator, that is the brother of Leon Edwards, right? And that is another big part of this, and it's part of why I'm really looking forward to it. Obviously, look, I'm going to be at this fight and all, and it's I think it's one I'm looking forward to. It's one of the most high-level fights I think I'll probably ever be attending in Ireland and all of that. So it's brilliant for me, and this, as I said, this is my list, and I like it that way. But I also think it's a very intriguing fight. Just first of all, on the Edwards thing, I think this could be. I talked there about Adesanya and I suppose the move to superstardom. No, I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case for Fabian Edwards, Leon Edwards, but I think maybe more stardom could be a thing that is achieved, right? So let's say Fabian wins this. Let's say Leon was to be Colby in his upcoming fight, if that is happening. Hopefully it'll be announced, or whoever he's fighting. Maybe there's like the part of this, like, are these lads the best siblings to ever fight in MMA? You know, we've seen a lot recently with the coverage of the BBC and different things in the UK, pushing a lot of MMA in different places. Could this be a thing that moves them up and makes them bigger stars in the UK? Look, with Bellator, they have put a lot of cards in the UK. I know this one is in Ireland, obviously not in the UK, but like, could they do a big card with Fabian on top of it, maybe in Birmingham or something like that? We've seen Leon in big cards in the UK. Like, I think it's a massive opportunity for them to obviously, run the UK, to be the leading guys in the UK. And it's been that case for a long time, that they have been kind of the guys pushing that. So that's a big part of this story as well, right? And the fight itself, I think it's an intriguing fight. Like, to me, we just talked about Adesanya. Like, I think I'd pick Johnny Eblen to beat Adesanya in a fight. Honestly, I think he is a ferocious wrestler, the likes of which doesn't really exist in the UFC's middleweight division. I don't think he's as good a striker as Adesanya, or Fabian for that matter, who is a very good striker. Actually, Fabian versus Adesanya would be a very good fight as well. But that's neither here nor there. But he's a competent striker, an improving striker. I would say a guy who's maybe underrated as a striker as well, because sometimes you go back and watch his game and the guy, he's just wrestling, the guy takes him down, okay, we know what's coming. And you forget there is large swathes of his fights. And obviously I'll be previewing this fight in totality before the event. But there are large parts of his fights where he does stand up and fight. Now, maybe not necessarily in this fight, we'll see with that, but a very well-rounded, a very, very good guy. And for Bellator, right, whatever the future holds, that's an argument for another day, or discussion for another day. But they have a real case right now that they have the best fighters in a lot of divisions. Like, could you argue Usman Nurmagomedov is the best lightweight in the world? I think you could. Like, okay, maybe not necessarily Patricio at the moment. Maybe you could argue AJ McKee is the best featherweight or the best lightweight. You know, he's right up there. He's really, really, really good. Nimkov, I think he is the best light heavyweight. And I think Eblen is the best middleweight as well, right? So this is, I suppose, an opportunity for him to show that. And an opportunity for Bellator to showcase the talent and the ability that they have, I suppose, atop this division. Now, I am intrigued by it for two reasons. Because I think it's going to be a real battle for placement, if we're being honest. And it's going to be an old school. I won't give you a whole breakdown because obviously I will be doing that in the breakdown, but it's going to be the striker versus grappler matchup with the striker can grapple, the grappler can strike. And that's going to be fascinating too. I think if you're Johnny Eblen and you have this opportunity as well, similar to Adesanya now, and maybe not similar in a superstar type of way, but this is Bellator's biggest card of the year. It always is. Like, Bellator 300 is a better card, no doubt about it. No shadow of a doubt about it. But this is the biggest card here. Every time they come to Ireland, it matters more, it means more. It's their biggest card. And if you can, look what Amosov did the last time. Like, Amosov has gone up and up and up in people's hearts and minds and everything after that. If Eblen can do a similar sort of thing, as for Fabian, if he can do that, star making. Absolutely star making. So that is a massive one. All right. Let's move on. And the next fight I want to talk about, and there's actually the last two fights, and I'm kind of going to cheat in the last one, but the penultimate fight is Stamp against Sheehan, 114 on September 29th. I really love this fight. As I said, I'll have a full breakdown of this as well, but Sheehan, at 36 years of age now, 34 fights into her career, after doing it all over everywhere. Like, she was in the UFC, she was in Risen, obviously now she's in One Championship, she was in Deep back in the day, Jules back in the day, you know. Oh, absolutely. I'm looking at her record here, Sherdog. What's it called? Smack Girl in 2007. Like, she's been fighting since 2007. You know, she fought Megumi Fuji back in 2008, one of the GOATs. I'm sure everyone here at Sherdog fondly remembers her. You know, she's been around for such a long time, and the run she has been on since 2016. She lost a couple of fights in the UFC in 2016, and then she's won, what? Let me just look here. 3, 6, 9 fights in a row, going for her 10th fight in a row. And the people she has beaten have been like Izuki Hirata. Now, I thought that was a relatively close fight, that one, but still, Hirata's very good. Beat Denise Zamboanga a couple of times as well, and, you know, just loads of wins over the last while, right? And she is, I suppose, someone who I know, like, she was on that One X card as well, like the biggest card that One Championship have ever done. I know she's someone that One Championship signed, and they expected her to be very good, but I'm not sure they expected her to be this good, you know? And she absolutely is. The other side of it then is Stamp, who's 25 years of age, 12 fights into her career. You know, she's only lost a couple of times. One of them was a submission against the opponent she beat last time, the very next time out. And the other one was Angela Lee, who, you know, is a superstar for One Championship and has been for a good few years. But there's no doubt about it, Stamp is the next superstar. No doubt about it at all. And, you know, she has won some really good fights. She's looked really good. Her penultimate fight, again, maybe not the best, but then she came out last time out, absolutely destroyed Elise Anderson, beautiful body kick, and, you know, the walkout, the show, and all of that. And the reason I'm looking forward to this one is that, right, the title fight as well, the strawweight title is on the line, and if one can get Stamp as the champion, there is something special there. You know, we always say it, right? If you're, you know, if you see Rogue was fighting, you want to tune in for that. And it was Nick Newell back in the day. You wanted to see him fighting. If Justin Gaethje back in World Series of Fighting back in the day, you wanted to see those people fighting. And I think Stamp can become one of those people, right? I really do. So this is a massive, and maybe, you know, this is like top 5 for the month star making edition or something like that, because I really do think she is in that position. And with One Championship after signing a new deal as well to go on Amazon for another while and do more and more cards all the time, she is someone who I think they will want to have in that position and want foreign center. So if she can win, it's going to be absolutely massive for a One Championship. And that card as well. John Lineker versus Stephen Lowe, man. What a fight that is. I almost picked that one, but we'll talk more about that in my preview when it comes up. Right. I'm kind of cheating for the next fight, right? I'm kind of cheating for the 5th fight. So I'm picking a fight from PFL Europe. But and look, the fight, this is the fight I'm going for, because I think this is the best fight. I think it's Frans Mlambo versus Francesco Nuzzi right now. Maybe you can call me biased, there's an Irish guy in there, but if you look at the amount of quality there and you look at who's in their prime on this, I actually think it's very hard to argue that this isn't the best fight in the card. Like, you have maybe the Lazy King and his fight, but I think he is kind of, you know, I think he's going to be a big favourite in that. Maybe you could argue that one, but I think all the other ones, they're all up and comers, and that's the beauty of this card, right? So I'm picking that as my fight to watch, but this is, you can have your UFCs, right? You can have your big pay-per-views in the UFC and your big Bellator Dublin cards and all of that, right? But I am so interested in this from PFL. And I'll tell you why, right? Everyone knows I've covered a lot of Cage Warriors over the last few years, and I am a big fan of what they do. And every time you turn up and you watch a Cage Warriors card, and they actually have a couple of very good cards, they actually have 160 coming up this month as well, and this is comparable. So I'm almost picking the two of them here. Like, they have Harila versus Hinden on that. Luke Riley's back on that card. There's some really good stuff. But it feels like we have a second one of them in Europe now with PFL Europe. Now, they aren't doing as many cards. I think, what's this, the 4 card and everything like that, and hopefully that goes up and up and up. But the level of up-and-coming talent on this card is absolutely insane. Right, and as I said, I will also have a breakdown of this, so you'll have lots of breakdowns this month. But just a couple of names like Cedric Doumbé. I think a lot of people, probably know him even better than me. I need to get more acquainted to him. But the Glory champion and all of that, 4-0 in MMA, really exciting. Lazy King. I think another one of these people like, that name, that nickname. You see Rebecca Hitman tweeting about him. He is a guy. People are getting excited about. Simeon Powell. Like, there's no doubt about it. Is he the best light heavyweight prospect in the world? It's hard to argue against that, isn't it? Dakota Dacheva, is there a better female prospect in the whole of the world? Never mind it's just a flyweight, right? In the whole world. And just that, like that alone, those few names I mentioned there, that's excitement enough to come into that. Then a bit of bias for me, but not even bias for me, because I think people love tuning in to see the Irish fighters. The fight I picked, Frans Mlambo versus Francesco Nuzzi. Like Nuzzi, I looked up my notes on him the other day. Someone asked me on my Q&A, and my notes were like, he's fast, exciting, throws these big punches, throws these big kicks, knock at her. Look at Frans Mlambo then, one of the best boxers in the bantamweight division. Such a flowy, hard-hitting fighter. Very technically good. That's going to be an absolute war of a fight. You have Dylan Chuk, who had an unbelievable win the last day. Like, the performance from Dylan Chuk was amazing. John Mitchell, another Irish guy coming through from Cork, fighting a very good guy in Chivas coming through. You've Ali Taleb, who I think, in my watching so far of the PFL Europe, I think he is the standout for me. This guy looks amazing. And he's fighting a 10-1 guy, Khurshid Kakarov, who also looks very, very good. Speaking of Irish, Valentina Scatizzi, the sister of Daniele Scatizzi, who's fought in Bellator a good few times, she's fighting on this as well. And she's a top prospect. Danny McCormack, who's the Invicta champion, waxes lyrical about her. And Chanel Dyer as well, who's 2-0. She's debuting here for PFL Europe. She actually fought Shauna Bannon, who's in the UFC, as an amateur, and that was they put on a very, very good fight. And she's fought some very good people as an amateur as well. Sinead Newland, who's an Irish fighter as well, and fought everyone, I suppose, as an amateur, and has lots of amateur fights. Made her debut earlier this year and I think she fought twice in the space of 2 weeks and got 2 finishes. So that card really, that's a card you're going to look back on in 5 years' time, and you're going to see 3 world champions from it, 4 world champions from it. Genuinely, I think that card is one of the best prospect cards I've ever seen. Like, ever seen. It's unbelievable. So, yeah, that is it. Those are my 5 fights for the month. I think I've given PFL the biggest push there, but they deserve it. That's an unbelievable card, and I can't wait for that, as I cannot wait for the rest of those fights this month. All right, I'll leave it there. My name is Sheehan for Sherdog.com, and I'll see you all next time.